Hello? Are you asleep? No. Yeah, I figured. You are not asleep because you are thinking about your hyperfixation and interests. I see. Well, funny enough, that is perfect timing because you requested this bedtime lecture on your special interests. This time, Ethel Cain, if I have that correct. Pretty sure I do. Maybe if I talk about your interest, you can listen and drift off to sleep. That way you don't have to stop thinking about it, but you can take kind of a back seat and just relax for a bit. So, how about that? Yeah? Okay. Speaking of listening, listen to this, because I'm going to explain how this works. Because you might have noticed I have just brought my equipment into your room. I have my laptop sitting on your body. I have all my equipment is out. And so you might be thinking, what's gonna happen? Well, all you have to do is just relax and be comfortable. So, I got you tucked in. This is good. We're off to a good start. You're looking quite comfy. Yes. And I'm just gonna talk and check in with you. And that's it. When you fall asleep, and you will fall asleep, better fall asleep, I will go into your kitchen. I will take whatever snacks that I find as my payment, and then I will leave. Yeah, I saw you had some bananas in there, and those will be gone. Oh yeah, any cookies that you got, I will be having that as my snack. So that's it. You don't really have to do anything else. So, Ethel Cain, are you ready? Yeah? Okay. Good. I found the kettle. Thank you. I made myself coffee. Hope that's okay. But I meant to say that the subject matter is a little bit heavy. And so I'm gonna make it a little less heavy. Hopefully without sacrificing meaning. But it will still be a little bit heavy because we're going to talk about the South. We're going to talk about the United States. We're going to talk about community, insular community. So, that being said, there's something about the late 90s and the early 2000s that we have to address, and that is, it was a deeply potent time and lives in the memory nostalgically of people who grew up in that time or were young in that time. This was, of course, the time when something was coming. Something big was coming, right? The social media revolution. All that stuff was on the way, but it wasn't there just yet. And so you still had if you grew up rural and you grew up in a small town in a bubble, you were lucky if you got to peek into another way of life. Many people who couldn't afford to travel out of their small town, you don't leave your small town, and you don't see other ways of being. so, if teenagers are lonely now, you can imagine what maybe it felt like in the 2000s, in the early 2000s, where, you wake up, you eat your cereal, and you go to school, and there's nothing else to do. And you can get trapped in your little community, in your culture. One of those bubbles that I think is a staple in our collective imagination is the white, religious, close-knit communities, like rural communities. And that is the context, very American context, that our protagonist finds herself in throughout this album. So, quite interesting, huh? Yeah? What do you think? Do you know a community like that? They're everywhere. Yeah, very true. Very true. There tends to be a difference between the city and the country sometimes. I grew up in Texas. Yeah. And I remember seeing a family pray in a ring around a giant statue of the Ten Commandments. And they were all, holding hands. And I remember there was a mom and a dad and kids. And there was a lot of kids. And they looked like something out of the pioneer days. And I remember looking at the kids, the oldest ones being like 9 or 10. And I wondered if at 9 or 10, if they already started to figure it out, that they were growing up very different than other kids, and that what they were being raised into is super insular, and kind of swallows their potential for other ways of thinking and other kinds of values. It's like a hyper presence, the situation where your family and your family's values are a hyper presence, a kind of consuming presence. I don't know what happened to those people. A lot of those kids are homeschooled, and when they're in public school, you can kind of tell. So, the first song on the album, Preacher's Daughter, is about a family kind of like that kind of family. It's about that insularity and about how your family lineage can haunt you as an individual. The song kind of gives us a very Southern Gothic warning. About consumption, and about pain. And in this song, we get this sense of foreshadowing. Like, the fate is already done. And it's a hint of what's going to happen to our protagonist. What's going to happen to her. And that it's too late. And like, Jesus as a figure was sacrificed. He was betrayed, and he was sacrificed. And he is consumed by us through wine, the blood and the body, wine and the wafer. That our protagonist is going to go through something like that. Something kind of, deeply painful and mythological almost. And in this album, we're going to follow this kind of religious haunting. And the haunting that comes from betrayal. So, in the visualizer for this song, I quite like visualizers because the symbolism in them isn't as complex as a music video. It's just like a little taste, and I like the visualizer for this song. Please allow me to pull it up. You can see that this album begins in this tone. There's this sunny but sparse and austere church, kind of bare bones. If you've been through the southern United States, you kind of recognize this style as like the Baptist church style. It's a little bit ominous, isn't it? That's right. I don't look too long. You can't look too long because you're supposed to be sleeping. But it's ominous. Yeah. So that's how the album begins. It sets the tone for the entire story. Now, in the next song, we've been forewarned. We've been warned. The album launches into American Teenager. American Teenager. And when you listen to this song, you can picture Ethel sitting on the bleachers, maybe at a football game. A typical American pastime. This means everything in, small town America land. The football is everything. Where I grew up, it would be on the front page of the paper, and like a horrific crime would be like at the back, because we don't care. We care about football. And if you play football, you can get away with whatever you want. Athletes are prioritized and cherished. So, anyway, I used to go to football games, even though I was a nerd, because that is what you do. Like, if you want to pretend, if you want to have any hope at all, you go to the football games. I think many of us relate to that feeling of inauthenticity that Ethel is experiencing, where you're kind of watching something that you don't have access to. Not really. And you can't, it's not really friendly to you. It's not really for you. It doesn't support you. It's inauthentic. And in the song, we understand that she's drinking a lot. She's kind of struggling with her faith, and she doesn't feel the glamour that you're supposed to feel from your teenage experience. And I actually think that feeling of being an outsider is more of a hallmark of being a teenager than the archetype of the cheerleader and the football star. Speaking of cheerleader, in the visualizer for this, you kind of just see her bumming around town in a cheerleading outfit, and she's just bumming. If you grew up and there's nothing to do, you just bum around town, you ride bikes with your friends, you just, try and fantasize about breaking into an abandoned building, and you just do drugs and you get up to stuff. So she's bumming around in this cheerleader outfit. But there are other shots of her in her normal clothes, and the juxtaposition is really clear. Like, that's the real thing. The cheerleader, the Bible thumping culture, the football culture. That's just one big costume, and it doesn't fit everybody. And the reality, the emotional reality behind it is bleak. And a bummer. It's a big bummer. It's probably why that song sounds so much like sadness, but also hope. Yeah. In the void-scape of small town life, teenagers, besides doing drugs, will daydream and fantasize about escape. And that's what Ethel does. And we know that because of the next song on the album. The next song on the album house in Nebraska. Ethel is singing about a boyfriend that she had, Willoughby Tucker. Willoughby. And it's clear that the two of them used to daydream together and built fantasy together of a house in Nebraska that they could run away to. They could escape their bummer town and just go be at peace in Nebraska. She is lonely, and we know that Willoughby is gone. He's gone. She hears from his mom, but, she doesn't have access to him anymore. And it's this sense of loss and pain where, when you get really close to somebody as a young person, whether a best friend, a boyfriend, a girlfriend, whatever, and you share your hopes and dreams and pain, and then either they move away or your friendship ends up being bad. You lose contact. Yeah. That can be very hard and very formative, and it makes you feel truly alone because the daydream is so different than what you actually have. So, the image that we are left with in this song, in the visualizer, is this kind of lonely house in a field, and it's framed by these kind of dead gnarled trees, but the sun is on it, and it's kind of waiting there. It's another one of these like deeply Americana images. By now we really get to emotionally inhabit Ethel Cain's inner world. And it's very raw, isn't it? And it's very relatable too, right? It's very relatable. Clearly the artist has put a lot of her personal experience in this album because it's so resonant. And it feels so personal, like you had to have lived through that atmosphere. And it's atmosphere, isn't it? You have to have lived in that atmosphere. And I think a lot of people have. It's small town America. And what's funny is that even though you're surrounded by cornfields and wide open spaces and plains, in one way, don't you want to just start walking and run away? There's no walls. There's no skyscrapers. There's no fences. Just fields, so go. But at the same time, the vastness of it makes it almost impossible to disappear and feel impossible to leave. Like there's nowhere to go. When you have a young person in that situation, it does not take much to convince them to leave. So the opportunity for, picking is present, fully present. It could just take one person, with a car, with a convincing smile, with a motorcycle. One person with any kind of validation or means can make something happen. And in the next song on the album, we understand that, Ethel's teenage years and her, relationship with Willoughby is deeply, deeply in the past. And she has now gotten caught up with a new person, a new guy. She has run off with somebody who had those means and is violent. And unfortunately, she is very loyal to him. very loyal to him, and she loves him, even though he mistreats her. And so often, it's a one-way street because it's a manipulative situation. But it's hard for people to see that when they are in it because you just want to be desired. Sometimes. When I was in high school, I would see older men drop off some of the female students. Like, some girls had these kind of unknown boyfriends, and I could never comprehend that, but it happens. Like, I don't know if they're from a different town, if they're military, like, where are they getting these older boyfriends? I don't know. But it happens. And the youthful imagination can be easily captured by what's different than what you grew up with. It can be very easily captured and taken away. How are you doing? Yeah, are you still relaxing? Good. Sleepy is good. Yeah. Getting tired is great. So, Ethel has run away from her family, her father, her town. In the visualizer, we see her shrouded in darkness, looking like fire on a highway. Yeah, she already here kind of looks like a ghost. That can happen in the tragedy of when you love someone, and your love is met with harm in return. So, we kind of know, again, in our cultural imagination, what that pipeline looks like with people. The naive runaway, the tragedy of the naive runaway. And this is no different. In the next song, that would be Family Tree, there's a bubble that is kind of bursting, or a tide that's turning, changing. Ethel faces some of her pain as she grows in this next chapter of her life. Now, to me, she's saying some enigmatic things here. Like, some people believe that this is when her relationship ends, that she begins to face what happens with her father, or maybe it's something that will be revealed in further albums, because there will be more albums about her life that are released in the future. So, either way, at this stage of the album, she begins to turn toward the past and re-understand the past. She's looking back with a new kind of sense of pain, I think. This turn towards the past happens in the next song as well, which is called Hard Times, Hard Times. So, Hard Times is a difficult song, and it deals with her past and the haunting that her childhood has had on her present. And the visualizer kind of matches the reflective nature of this song and alleviates some of the pain by showing us the kind of artist and camera crew of friends just kind of in a river under a road. And it's a very kind of sweet image. It really hits at this a kind of small town ache, more of that bumming, that sense of wandering and this disconnect from family, kind of from context, but also innocence. And so the next, I guess, act of this album really kicks off from, she's away from her home, she's reflected on the past, and now she is picked up. she meets up a man and is picked up by a man named Isaiah, and the two of them go on a road trip from Texas to California. And like before, she puts a lot of stock in this guy. He's so different. He's a bit kind of glamorous. She likes being in his truck. This song feels like a road trip. You know, this song. It has elements of that kind of Texas flair and the Southwest flair in the way the music sounds. It's quite nice. It's airy, it's open, but it has a driving sense to it in the song. You really get a sense that these two are not tied down, right? Isaiah is kind of a wanderer, and so is she. They're just, two beings out there. But they find solace in each other's company. I think this is the horror of the album. Like, this song is so kind of breezy and earnest and cool, but it's really contextualized by the rest of the album. Like what's happened before, what's been foreshadowed, and that kind of cloud that hangs over this song. So, what goes wrong here? What goes wrong? Well, away from home, across America, there's a tonal shift. And in the next song, Gibson Girl, you feel a darkness kind of creep in. And that song has a bit of a sultry, moody edge. A bit of an edge to it. Because Ethel is experiencing an older pattern of being sexualized. She finds both empowerment in it, but it's an insecure empowerment. So it's complicated. It has grief in it. It's a kind of an old tale of masculinity and exploitation. I think, women are meant, they're taught that they're meant to be desired. They're taught that. And it can be very consuming. Very consuming. Being desired is one of the only languages sometimes that we have for what it means to be loved. Being desired in the way that this song portrays, we know that that's not love. And in this environment of exploitation, there's alcohol involved and drugs and that type of thing. And in the next song, Tolmea, the consequences of that become very, very clear in the slide into darkness that started in the last song. Really reaches its bottom in this song. Sometimes there are many branches on a tree, and I think about that as I zoom out and I look at people who all came from the same town, and I think about what happened to everybody. What happened to all the people that I know. Some had opportunities and some did not. I think this right here is what makes or helps this album resonate with so many people, because it kind of reaches a mythic status. A mythic status, like, because it is extreme, the arc of the story, the journey that our character goes on, because it's extreme, it sheds light on what is actually tragically ordinary pain in many people's lives. So it's an extreme, it's all the way at the other end of the dial about, what can algorithmically happen when you have the kind of beginnings that Ethel had in life. But because of that, it helps people wrestle with their own pain as they went on their own journey from either the same or similar beginnings. Over the next few songs, we understand that the very complicated emotions that Ethel felt towards Isaiah, including love and wanting and longing, are not returned, and Isaiah kind of punishes her. He is not good for her. He wants to own her in a way that is unbalanced and almost represents a kind of obsessive evil, probably. But we learn that he takes her life and that he keeps her, parts of her, in a freezer to literally consume her after she has passed away, which goes all the way back to the first song about the idea of sacrifice and the idea of betrayal and the idea of consumption of the body, which is a religious feature. So we get in a few songs, including Strangers, which is the most popular song on the album, we get her point of view from the afterlife as she's looking down, as she reflects on her trajectory, and as she literally looks upon the scene of Isaiah after she has passed. It's a very powerful point of view. She reflects on the nature of love, her love, the warnings of it, with all the pain that we feel when we hear her asking if she is good. There is the innocence, the naiveness of her as a person, which is devastating because all that she wanted was to be wanted. And look at the tragedy of what happened to her. It's, the visualizer for that song is really incredible. It's just a bed in a room, it's the American flag. It has wood paneled walls like her childhood home. It's a window covered in newspaper, and there is a body that kind of appears and disappears. And there's a suggestion of a rope. So that the rope or the noose is a recurring image throughout the album. So yeah, it's pretty incredible. Betrayal is such a major part of the album. She's kind of betrayed all the time by loving something that abandons her. So God, her father, the men that she's had relationships with, just a series of betrayals. I kind of wonder what it means that at the end of the album she is kind of connecting and speaking to her mother, who has largely been absent in the narrative. Her mom. She's speaking to her mom, another woman. It's quite interesting to me. All in all, a very powerful album with deeply emotional vocals and themes that resonate with so many people, right? So many people. Everybody who comes from kind of a hot, claustrophobic, small town, and you just can't seem to get away because kind of swallows you and your potential. It betrays your potential sometimes. I see that you are quickly falling asleep, so I suppose I will end by saying that, we are a part of living in someone else's vision. And in this story, you see a character who has faced the consequences of many stories, like a narrative burden. And, we live kind of in a very strange dream that is dreamed and made by people all the time. And we carry narrative burdens through the world with us. But when you think about stories that don't serve you, you get to leave those behind. And you get to put new things out into the world, new pieces of art, like this album is a piece of art. You get to put out poetry and writing and expression and creativity to both wrestle with an old narrative but to assert a new one. Now that you are 100% asleep, I will be taking my equipment and some snacks from your kitchen, and I will see myself out, but I will be back very soon with another lecture to help you sleep and relax. So, job well done to both of us, and I will see you very soon. So, good night,